Hello, everyone, and welcome to my my second last Star Wars video ever. Well, technically, this isn't a book review, so I can kind of get around doing that. But yeah, I decided to do one more Star Wars review so soon after saying I was pretty much done with it because my last review I wasn't very happy with because I didn't like Rise of Skywalker, and I pretty much just drunkenly explained why I didn't like that movie. Well, I think I liked the movie, but not for the reasons that the creators of the movie intended. I think I liked it because it was so bad that I kind of got a kick out of how bad it got. It's the most so bad it's good Star Wars movie ever made. And so that was really negative. And then the books I decided to review, they were kind of like, yeah, it was all right. You know, there was a lot of, I was kind of ho-hum towards them. I didn't really go out with a bang like I wanted to. Crucible kind of let me down. I thought Crucible was going to be this grand finale. That would have been a great one to go out on. Then I read it, and I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like, again, it was a lot of like, it's all right. So my final video, I wasn't super happy with it. But thank God The Mandalorian came around, and thank God I finally got access to Disney+. So I decided to catch up to the rest of the world and actually watch the show, and I really, really liked it. It's great. It feels nice to actually feel good about something Star Wars related again. No controversies, no behind-the-scenes turmoil, no split fan base and arguing and bitching at each other back and forth. None of that shit. We just got a perfectly solid show that is very well made, and it didn't overstay its welcome. It's only 8 episodes, and it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I wish I could just cut the review off right there, but I guess I should go into some detail of why I explained The Mandalorian. I'm going to stay as spoiler-free as possible. Actually, it's pretty easy to talk about the show without spoiling a whole lot, because one of the things I liked about the show is how simple it was and how it kind of felt like a throwback to like the old shows that I watched when I was younger. And the show, well, you know, in 2019, I spent a lot of time watching Star Trek. I'd never watched all of Star Trek The Next Generation and I didn't watch anything beyond that. So I finally was like, all right, I'm going to sit down and watch all of Star Trek from the original show, which I'd watched most of that before, but I watched all of that again. The Next Gen, which I watched through in its entirety, and I discovered while watching it, it's like, wow, I watched more of the show than I thought, because I remember all this stuff. So I think I watched about half of Next Gen previously before my big marathon. So now I've seen all of it. And I also watched the animated series, which I don't think anybody really cares about. Not bad, though. I did enjoy it for what it was. And I watched DS9, which came heavily recommended to me, and I really enjoyed that. And I've been told that I've watched Trek at its best, and I can pretty much stop there. But one of these days, maybe I'll check out Voyager and Enterprise, and I don't think I would enjoy Discovery, because actually, Discovery, based on what I've seen and the clips that I've seen, it looks like what I feared a Star Wars show would have turned into. But this is but instead with The Mandalorian, we get the exact Star Wars show I've always wanted. You know, I'm wearing the Boba Fett shirt right now, and this show is kind of how I've always pictured a Boba Fett movie, except it's not Boba Fett, but you know, that spaghetti western, simple, you know, I think there's a manga called like Wolf and Cub or something like that, and it's very similarly structured to that. Something very simple with a character, you don't see his face, he doesn't talk much, yet you still get a sense of who he is and what he's all about through simple motions and simple actions, which I really like. I appreciate I appreciate being able to convey emotions by doing very little. I'm a big fan of like, what can you create when you restrict yourself? It's one of the reasons I enjoyed Primal so much. For those of you who haven't watched the show, it was on Adult Swim late last year. I think more episodes are coming out soon, I think later this month. And it's by Genndy Tartakovsky, who also worked on the 2D Clone Wars animated show. He's a great, great artist, and Primal is, I think, personally the best thing he's ever done. This is absolutely amazing. And all it is a caveman and a dinosaur that team up and try to survive prehistoric times with no dialogue. And yet you get a sense of who they are, you get a sense of their partnership and what they're trying to do. And it's gory as hell, which is also great. I made a comment on Twitter, it's the most me thing ever put on TV. And I used to think that was Inhumanoids, but no, Primal is the most me thing ever put on TV. I loved it. And again, you get a sense of who these characters are without any dialogue. And I love that with the Mandalorian, Mando, you get you know exactly who he is without them being bogged down with a ton of exposition, without him having to emote, because you don't see his face for most of the show. And I'm gonna stay as spoiler free as possible, but you do see his face in the last episode. I'll say that, and it's not treated like that big of a deal, which I also kind of liked. And it's it's basically at the core, it's about this bounty hunter who comes to take care of the baby Yoda, the child, which I also love. It's like they're characters with no names almost. It's the Mandalorian, the child. And again, which is a perfect callback to like The Man with No Name, those old Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, which are my favorite westerns ever. Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I love those movies. And so I always pictured a Boba Fett movie kind of made in that same vein, but with Star Wars iconography. And this show captured it about as close to... I mean, it's almost like they went inside my head and just pulled out those like loose images I had in my brain and constructed a great, like, simple story around it. And had a ton of great characters. Like, the guest stars they had in the show were incredible. Gus from Breaking Bad, Carl Weathers, my boy. I love Carl Weathers. I love that man. Apollo Creed. Huge Rocky fan, so I pop whenever I see Carl Weathers in anything. What's her name? The MMA fighter who was in, she was in Deadpool. Gina Carano, yeah, and she's got a role in it. She's great. Bill Burr is in it. Clancy Brown is in it. I mean, they got a ton of really good guest stars for this. Werner Herzog is in this, which I was like, what the fuck? How did they get him to be in this? That's incredible. But and everybody's great in it. And what I really liked about it is that most of these episodes, and there is an overall story arc to the season, but most of the episodes work well as standalone episodes. Which, again, going back to me just marathoning the holy hell out of Star Trek The Next Generation this year, I really like a lot of the standalone episode format. And I know everything in the age of the internet and streaming services and everything, you got to have a story arc, and everybody is like, you got to keep them binging, and how you do that is you have each episode play one into the other. But I kind of miss those older shows where in Star Trek, you would have just a standalone adventure and the characters would develop throughout the course of the show, and the relationships would change and get stronger throughout the course of the show, and there would be like big things that they would build to, like the Borg, but a lot of the episodes worked well as standalone episodes, and shows like Xena had that as well, shows like Hercules and the X-Files. I was a huge fan of the X-Files as a kid, and there were, again, famously, anybody who talks about that show, there's two types of episodes. You have the alien conspiracy storyline episodes, which is the big story throughout the show, and you have the Monster of the Week episodes where it's just Mulder and Scully solving a case about some random thing that crosses their paths. And I realized as an adult that I much preferred the Monster of the Week episodes over the storyline episodes, because the storyline got so convoluted, and I think it got to a point where they didn't even know how to end it. So I just kind of threw my hands up. I was like, nah, just give me the standalone monster episodes. Those are better. But so The Mandalorian felt like a throwback to that, where you don't necessarily have to even... you could watch any one of the episodes and you probably wouldn't be lost. You could jump into it pretty easily. I know in a streaming service, there's no reason to do that, but it does kind of feel like a throwback in a good way, where it is kind of that old, each episode is its own story. And because of that, each episode feels different. Each episode has its own setting. And they're all really entertaining and really enjoyable. And they're all like based on classic familiar stories, like the warrior training the villagers to defend themselves, and the prison break episode, and various things that are very old school and familiar. But they're also classic and timeless, and these are stories that I've seen told 1,000 times, and I always tend to enjoy. And Star Wars, and Red Letter Media brought this up, so I'm not bringing up anything that hasn't already been said, but Red Letter Media made the great point that Star Wars itself was based on a bunch of things that had come from the past, ancient myths and stories, and Kurosawa films and spaghetti westerns and everything else, Flash Gordon serials and anything that Lucas could just pull inspiration from. And The Mandalorian really does feel like a throwback to that. And through it all, I like all the characters, and I love the simplicity of it. I like that they get a lot out of so little, and I think it's very, very cool to see a show like that. And to see a show like that get received so well. That's the other thing, because while I was watching it, I was kind of amazed that the show got as popular as it did, because I was like, this feels like something that would have been made like 20 years ago and would have been popular 20 years ago, but I'm like, God, would people enjoy this today? I guess so, because it's really popular now. And I heard it overtook Stranger Things as like the most popular streamed show out there today. And I was like, I'm not surprised. I guess I am surprised, but I'm happy that it happened anyway, because it's not because it's Star Wars, but because it's a show that actually deserves to succeed, because it's really good. And of course, I have to bring this up. Baby Yoda, or the child, the more proper name for the character. The child is absolutely adorable and funny and charming without being overbearing. Because, whenever you have a character like that, you worry about how much is too much. I think back to Olaf when I first watched Frozen, and I was like, oh God, that snowman is going to be terrible. Then I watched it, he wasn't so bad. So he actually had some of the highlights of the movie for me. So. Or you could get something like, God, what's a great example? Well, I guess Jar Jar Binks would be the Star Wars example to go to, where it's like you can go too far and it just becomes ridiculous. But I thought we got the right amount of Baby Yoda, and I really wanted Mando to protect him, so they accomplished what they wanted to do with it, where it was like, he's kind of the heart of the whole thing. To bring my own stupid fandoms into it, it's kind of like Son of Godzilla in that way, even though Manila is totally hideous and not cute at all. He is kind of funny and charming in that movie, and when Godzilla like protects him, there is that kind of like, yeah, it's cool. And then at the end, when they huddle together while they're hibernating, it's like, oh, that's so sweet. So yeah, this is the last time you'll hear me compare Son of Godzilla to The Mandalorian, but it's, the relationship between Mando and the child I thought was very well done, and I can see why everybody's going gaga over the Baby Yoda character, because it is so stinking cute, so it works. I think my favorite episode was the Prison Break episode, because it was just a great small cast of like extra characters that they brought in, and it was just a lot of fun to watch with all the betrayals and backstabbing going on, and it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I think there's plenty of room to do more stories like that. And thank God the season was as short as it was. It was only 8 episodes, which a lot of shows that come out now, it'll be like 13 to 26. Because I think 13 is like the magic number for syndication or something like that. So a lot of seasons shoot for 13. Or 26. Those seem to be the two that they go for, which is 13 times 2. And there's some reason for that. I don't know. It has something to do with the schedule and the number of times that they can show it in a year, but I don't know the exact specifics of it. But a lot of times, like, the seasons for a lot of these shows feel way too long. I think back to the Marvel Netflix shows where they released Daredevil, which was a big hit and really good. I finally watched season 3, actually, a year after it came out. I really enjoyed it. So Daredevil, really good. And then they thought, oh, let's do 45 of these things. And almost all of the shows that they did after Daredevil were like, yeah, okay, Jessica Jones, I was like, I was kind of iffy on that one. Season 2 was terrible. Luke Cage, it's like, okay, there's a really good, like, 6-7 episode season stretched out to 13. It's like, there's a lot of stuff you could have cut. The Punisher, same thing. It's like, there's a really good, like, 6 or 7 episode season, but when they start going into all the stuff about Microchip's family, I'm like, dude, time out. I don't care. Like, I really don't care. You could cut all this out. And Iron Fist was just a joke. That would have been a joke even if it was only 4 episodes. But so, I appreciated that it was only 8 episodes, and I think it went by quickly. It was fun to watch. I enjoyed it, and hopefully they continue to do that when they do season 2. Now, one of my fears is that because this show was a hit and Disney doesn't know how to stop themselves, they're gonna go overboard, and we're gonna do like 45 Star Wars shows. I'm like, no, dude. Okay, you got the Kenobi one coming out, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. And again, I'll make it easy on you. take the Kenobi book from the expanded universe and adapt that. Start with that as your like basis for the Kenobi show, and just run with that, and you should be okay. If you just adapt that book, I think you'll be okay. I'm making the work easy for you, okay? You can just adapt that book and you'll be fine. But, my fear is that they're going to do like 12 of these, and they're just going to overdo it. And then Mandalorian is going to turn into like Walking Dead did, where Walking Dead's first season, I believe, was only 6 episodes. And then it became such a big hit that's like, oh, well, we got to up it to 13 the next season. Oh, it's still a huge hit. Now let's up it to 16 per season. And, I'll watch a season of The Walking Dead, and I get through it. It's like, I really feel like this would be better if you cut it in half, because there's so much dead time. There is so much dead time in this show that you don't need. So, obviously we're going to get a season 2 of The Mandalorian. I'm fully open to a season 2, and I'm open to a Kenobi show, but I'm just hoping they don't do like, okay, let's do 100 Star Wars shows. I mean, I heard rumors going around that they were going to do a show about one of the characters from Rogue One. I forget which one, and I'm like, really? I was like, I mean, I enjoyed Rogue One, but it's like, really? You're going to give one of the characters a show? That seems like a bit much. But it's like, look, just baby steps. Keep it small, and Mandalorian excelled because it's smaller stories. You don't have to go too big with it. If I get to a point where Mandalorian is destroying a Death Star-like super weapon, I'm gonna zone out, because it's like, nope, you're missing the point. You're completely missing it. As far as like any mysteries for season 2, the only thing is like, the guy that Gus from Breaking Bad plays is clearly tied with the Mandalorians in some way, given how the season ends. So it'll be interesting to see how that ties together. And there's also like, what exactly Baby Yoda is. What is the child? I don't think it has to be anything more complicated than it's like, look, he's a member of Yoda's race who is highly force sensitive, and the entire race went into hiding after the Empire came about. And the child was just the poor, unfortunate soul that crossed the Empire's path. So they're trying to use him as a way to, A, duplicate their powers because they're so heavily force sensitive, and B, find the rest of their race so they could just enslave them and just do whatever evil things they wanted to do with them. So I don't think it has to be anything bigger than that. Some are saying it's like, oh, it's a clone of Yoda, or oh, it's like Yoda reincarnate or something like that. I don't think it needs to be anything bigger than that. It's like, no, his race just went into hiding and now Mandalorian's going to try and find him. That's all it needs to be. I don't think it needs to be anything bigger than that. But in any case, I highly recommend The Mandalorian. I think if you were disappointed with the sequel trilogy, I think Mandalorian is probably going to make you happy and is closer to what most old school Star Wars fans would have wanted. I thought it was great. I really liked it. Again, it was simple. It was simple yet emotional in the right places, and it was badass, and it was awesome. The action in it was great, and all the different episodes, I can recall specific episodes along the way, which is usually a good sign of a show. Because normally a lot of more recent shows that I've watched, where it's like the whole season just kind of blends together because it is all typically one story, and that isn't always a bad thing. I mean, I love Better Call Saul. I can't wait for the new season of that, and that's an ongoing storyline. But there's something about the approach of The Mandalorian that felt classic and good to me, and I really, really liked it. So, as a Star Wars fan, I'm happy. As a fan of television, I'm happy. And good work, Disney, and just keep doing it like this. You don't need to go any bigger than this. Just keep making the stuff like this, and I think we'll be okay with Star Wars in the future. Please, for the love of God, don't make another movie for at least another decade. just keep making shows, and I think we'll be okay. But don't make like 45 of them. Don't go too far with it. You can keep it down to 1 or 2 for a while and see how long you can run that for. But in any case, that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. And man, it feels good to be positive about Star Wars again. That was really cool. Thank you, Disney. I appreciate it. I've also been marathoning the fuck out of Gargoyles on Disney Plus, which, man, that show was like Game of Thrones for kids before anyone even knew what Game of Thrones was. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe they got away with some of this stuff in a kids show. That's amazing. But anyway, again, I'm done. I'm out. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and I'll see you all later.